First one is to suspend board policy 1221.
Val, is that your resolution?
Yes. I am asking for approval to suspend board policy 1221, the athletic and extracurricular activities, to align with the other surrounding school districts.
Is there a second?
Second.
Questions or comments? Can we have a roll call?
Oh, wait. I have a question, comment.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
Speak up, Brian.
Okay, all right, so this is for the GPA. I just want to throw my 2 cents in on this. I think we should keep our standards. When I was in school, my sister was in school, we were raised that academics come first. And Mr. LaBeouf, if he's still in attendance, he would know that my sister was an exceptional track athlete, and she did keep her grades up throughout the entire 4 years she was up at the high school. And outside of high school, I've always believed that whenever, if something goes wrong with athletics, like you get a career-ending injury or you become a bust, you have to rely on your college education, your high school education. And to lower the standards could potentially cause kids not want to follow through with that, and in turn jeopardize their future. So I just want to say that I'm in support of keeping our 2.0, and that's all I got. So if anyone else wants the floor, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
I just have one other comment. Okay. PSBA, we reached out to PSBA, and their response was that our board policy 1221 is unique to our district and many other districts. They all decide to use the PIAA eligibility guidelines rather than having a separate policy. So that's just what PSBA had said. That's it.
Any other questions or comments?
Yes, I have a quick comment. I would like to see us follow a path that involves teachers and administrators to make more kids eligible and to have them succeed. I don't know what's magic about 2.0. Why not 2.5? If you can magically make kids accomplish things, why not 3.0? Moses didn't bring this number down. So I think this is something that needs more discussion. I'd like to see teachers involved. I'd like to see involved parents involved. We seem to be this all or nothing decision we're making, and I frankly just don't get it. This is a significant change to the fiber and fabric of Gateway, and I'm not sure what we're rushing into this for.
So it looks to me like we're at a crossroads here. We have two possible paths forward. We could go ahead and vote right now, or we could table it. Or what we could do is vote either this up or down and then decide later on, like a month from now, to come back with an updated policy and then vote that in. So this would turn out to be a bridge. So there are a couple different ways we could proceed if we're still uncomfortable. So the question for the board is, are you uncomfortable right now? Do you think we could do a better job with this? Like Jack said, I think we
Yes.
do.
There's
So
actually another policy
there's
below
no-
that on the agenda that's up for consideration as well.
Okay, thank you.
So how do we get to your policy?
We have to vote on
But we have to vote on action item number 1 first.
Okay?
Is my-
Any
is
other
that correct,
questions or
Mr. President?
comments?
Is that correct?
Right. Seeing none, can we have a roll call?
Dr. Kalkstein,
With this voting on?
Number 1.
Yeah.
Mr. Lapsevich,
Yeah.
Mr. McIntyre,
No.
Mr. Ritter,
No?
Mrs. Warning,
Yes.
Mr. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Bova,
No.
Mrs. Cerrucci,
No.
Mr. Gottman.
No.
Motion fails.
Motion fails. Okay, number 2.
All right, number 2, we've been discussing this all evening. And for quite some time with the athletic committee and the policy committee. It's something that's been brought up apparently for the last couple years. apparently the only resolution that's come forward out of it was to suspend it altogether, which is something I didn't feel comfortable doing. So I'm making a motion to revise the current policy. I believe, is the current policy above me right now? With the changes?
Yes. The re-
Okay, so I'm gonna try to be brief with this to make a proper explanation of it. The current policy as it's stated, okay, is it shall be the policy of the board that students maintain a 2.0 or above cumulative grade point average or a 2.0 or above grade point average for a previous 9-week grading period. And a very important word here is and maintain 2.0 or above grade point average at the midpoint of the next 9-week grading period, along with the weekly requirements established by the PIAA. Now, if you read that literally how it says, it does not allow for a student that is ineligible at the 9-week mark to become eligible at the 4.5-week mark. It allows for them to lose eligibility, but because of the word "and" there, which was a change from the former policy, which had an "or" there, meaning if you had the 9-week and you weren't there, you had to have the 9-week or the 4.5. Now it's "and," so you have to have both. And it's been an item of debate and topic amongst this board, the previous board, and it left a lot of weird interpretations up in the air. So my goal with my rewrite of the policy was to make that more clear. And the way I would like to rephrase that paragraph, as it's shown above, is to be eligible for extracurricular activities, all students must, in addition to adhering to all PIAA qualifications, have a cumulative GPA of no less than 2.0, or have a GPA of no less than 2.0 at the end of the most recent of the following: the 9-week grading period, the 3-week GPA verification, and a 6-week GPA verification. So what this does is it gives every student the opportunity every 3 weeks of the school year to gain or lose eligibility. Every 3 weeks, there's going to be a GPA verification. And again, they'll be able to either move up or move down. In my opinion, I think it'll help it gives us more flags and more opportunities to see kids that are starting to slip and give them an opportunity to move back up. And it doesn't punish them by removing a whole 9-week chunk of eligibility, which in many cases is almost the entire season. At most, if we're looking at football, if it's a 3-week deal, odds are they're looking at probably losing 2 games. And then if they have to work to get back, and if they do the work, they regain eligibility.
In addition to that following paragraph.
Yeah. The current policy reads, official cumulative GPA check verifications will be calculated every 9 weeks. Students entering grades 7 through 12 who do not qualify in June will have a one-time right to an August recheck to include summer school participation for classes they are failing. Each student will have one opportunity during her enrollment to apply summer school grades to meet eligibility. After this single August recheck option is exhausted, eligibility will be determined by the 9-week GPA verifications as well as the 4.5-week midpoint verifications. Furthermore, students must maintain a weekly eligibility status as established by the PIAA. What that basically means is you get one chance to go to summer school and regain eligibility. I would like to eliminate that phrasing essentially altogether. I think it, in effect, it discourages kids from attending summer school. I think that's maybe not the intent of it when it was written, but I think that's an obvious repercussion of it, and I think we can do better. So my wording would be, official cumulative GPA checks verifications will be calculated every 9 weeks. Students entering grades 7 through 12 who do not qualify in June will have a right to an August recheck to include summer school participation to replace failing grades from the June report card. That gives a student athlete, student participant, a chance every year to take summer school classes to further their education and to regain their eligibility. Now, a paragraph I believe will stay, that I believe should stay, and it's something I think that has been talked about here several times, and it is current policy, is that ineligible students must attend the study sessions organized by the building principal and cooperate with all study sessions requirements in order to practice in sports and/or activities during the period of ineligibility. An ineligible student may not travel with the team or activity and may not wear the team activity garb. However, an ineligible student may sit on the bench during home games and events. So what this means is if you are ineligible, that just means you're not allowed to compete. You are still allowed to attend practice. You are still getting that daily structure. You're not technically out running the streets. You are still allowed to be a part of the team. You are not kicked off the team altogether. You are still allowed to participate. However, in order to do so, you must attend the required study sessions and be working towards getting your grades back up. In the current policy, students who do not have a GPA of 2.0 as outlined in this policy may not try out for teams or activities unless the ability to become eligible exists before the start of the season or activity. I didn't understand the intent of that. I don't know how many teams we actually do have cuts and tryouts and you know, making the team for. I think it's unnecessary language that maybe bogs things down a little bit, so I was moving to strike that. And then finally, any coach or sponsor who does not check eligibility and follow the procedure, the policy, will be removed from his or her coaching sponsoring position at the point of discovery.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Questions or comments?
Question. Dr. Short, could you explain what you did at the policy meeting about the ninth grade, incoming ninth graders and the transition period, what your thoughts were about that?
Yes, when we had multiple policy committee meetings over the last 2 years, I believe. And one of the items that consistently came up, and Dr. Chakey referenced this with the ninth grade academy, that incoming freshmen, it has been established with data that there is a constant battle between the social-emotional issues of transitioning into a high school that is now comprehensive 9 through 12. For a lot of us, I believe, in this room, when we went to high school, the building was configured 10 to 12. And that is consistent with what you see in varsity interscholastic athletics, because it's very rare that you have a ninth grader perform at that level. A, because they're not physically mature enough to compete with 17 and 18-year-old students. One of the issues that we've been dealing with over the years is that transition from our 7-8 building into the high school, where we do have a rigorous curriculum, not that we don't have it at the middle school, but we have tiered classes, meaning in honors, in AP, and in academic track classes. Over the course of that first 9 weeks in the semester, we see a large number of students, somewhere around the 30 percentile level below a 2.0. A lot of kids who, coming from the middle school, maybe have had a 2.5 or a 3.0. It's an adjustment period, and I think everyone will agree with that data. And those with children understand the anxiety filled from going from one building to another. At the end of that ninth grade year, we examined data from the last 4 or 5 years, which had been consistent with the numbers represented probably around 80 plus students out of a graduating class of 300 below a 2.0. In some instances, we've had students below a 1.5 or a 1.0 that have been above a 2.0 in their middle school careers. That in itself makes that individual to become eligible extremely difficult to achieve that 2.0 over the next year or 2 years. And in some situations, students do, in fact, say, hey, look, I'm not even going to try to go off with this athletic team or this club or this band or musical group. It's not in their repertoire to even think about it. So we had talked about eliminating the GPA requirement for the ninth grade year, utilizing the PIAA policy for ninth grade, allowing them to transition, acclimation to the high school, then having our 2.0 policy kick into effect the way it was worded and written. That was one of the discussion focal points that came out of our policy committee meeting.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Yes, I just had a technical question. I can't find it, but you have a 3-week and a 6-week evaluation period. Don't those overlap? Aren't they mutually exclusive, or
No, sir.
how does it work?
Let me, can I? So when we sat down, I sat down with Rick and Dr. Short too, and said, you know, for me personally, I'm willing to look at this policy because it does have some problems and some confusion, and I think most people agreed that having a kid have an opportunity to get back on the team sooner would be more motivating. To have a kid have to sit out for an entire season or miss 9 weeks doesn't motivate a child to do better, because if the GPA falls below the 2.0 and they think, well, I'm out for the rest of the season, where's the motivation to get the grade up, right? Because ultimately our goal is to get the kid to succeed academically. So we said, how can we shorten the review time
The
so
window,
that
yeah.
if a kid does the work, a student does the work, he goes through the effort, he brings his grade up, he
Quickly
should have an
rewarded.
opportunity to get back on the team or the band or whatever extracurricular activity that was. And Dr. Short suggested 3-week intervals.
I
So
like
you
that.
have your start at your 9 weeks, you have 3 weeks, you have 6 weeks, and then you have the end of the
Those are-
grading period.
Those are points in time, interval points
Exactly.
in time,
So we're
not
giving
a
3-week
stretch.
intervals to allow a child to have a sooner opportunity to get his grades back up and be able to participate in that activity.
That makes
So,
sense.
In other words, John, if a student at the end of a 9-week grading period doesn't have the cumulative and doesn't have the 2.0 on that grading period, they have a chance at 3 weeks to get that grading period up to 2.0. If they still don't have it, they have another chance at the 6-week mark.
I like that. Okay.
To attain that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Val, I know we had discussed at length at some of the policy and committee meetings about the 9th grade thing. Would it be acceptable for you if we maybe amend this, just do all this right now? Because I know that's something we were looking at doing, was discussing, eliminating the standard for the 9th grade year and letting them adhere to the PIAA. Can we amend this current policy to only apply for grades 10 through 12? And do you think you would support that?
I didn't say anything, we were looking at the policy, but that's, a good thing to do.
Well, here's the deal. This policy is not getting passed or voted on tonight. It's getting voted on to put on public display to allow for additional comment for 30 days from the public. So one option is to go with the policy as Mr. McIntyre has presented it, or to amend it, or there's no reason that at a future board meeting somebody can't amend this policy again if it gets passed. What I would like to say is that since I have been elected to the Gateway School Board, it's been over 2 years, this policy has been a subject of discussion. It has been talked about rewriting. It has tried to been overwritten during sporting events, during inopportune times. And it has, personally, I have reiterated that we need to review the policy and do it correctly. And this is the first policy revision in 2 years that I have seen. And I think that Rick should be commended for his efforts at bringing something to the board that addresses the problems with the policy without lowering the standards, which is the overwhelming response that I receive from the community, is we do not want to lower our standards. So right now, I totally support putting this policy on display for public comment because I think it does those two things. It's a good compromise. It's a good start. I think going from our current policy to wiping it away to nothing or just the PIAA standards is too drastic. I think that if you have something that we can work with and we can make small baby steps and they can continue to be improved on and the public's feedback can be listened to.
So Mary Beth, this 30-day public comment period would be a great time for folks like Jim, who came up with the brilliant, 2.8 versus 2.9 instead of 2.0 versus 3.0. In other words, a different sliding scale could be considered. And the other one was some sort of instead of an eligible, put them on a gateway probation period, and then we get to invent what we mean by finding a way to drag those students, out of the pit that they're digging themselves into and get them, restored, like Rick is attempting to do here. So if there are any other brilliant ideas out there and the public, this would be a great 30-day period to do that, right?
I would add that I believe that anything that goes into policy that affects how we calculate GPA and would affect whether or not a student is eligible or ineligible at the beginning of the year, I think that sort of change is going to have to wait until the beginning of next year, because of the 30-day policy,
too late.
the 30-day notice, we will not be able to implement that at the beginning of the school year this year. So I think that would be unfair to the student body on the whole to have the spring athletes
I disagree
have
with
a
you.
different standard
I
than
don't
the
agree.
fall.
I don't agree with that.
That would be up to Mr. President.
Just a question. So, I'm reading this, I've never been to a school board meeting before, so I figured, what the heck? I live here, right, might as well see what's going on.
Always welcome.
And there's just something that I don't understand, like, it was a lot of concentration on the athletics and who they can't play athletics, but if there's a student that's on student council and has a lower grade, are they no longer allowed to be on student council?
Correct.
Can they no longer be a welcome to the freshman committee?
It's all
person?
extracurricular activities.
It's all extracurricular
Yeah,
activities.
that's how it's actually worded, is to be eligible for extracurricular activities, all students.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I
ma'am.
understood what I was hearing. Doesn't do much good to sit here and not know what's going on.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Scotty, Mr. President,
No,
Is it-
as is, we can amend later, as is written.
Okay.
Yeah, it's as is.
is it possible to vote on Mr. McIntyre's and call for a policy meeting next week?
Sorry?
We would be voting on Mr. McIntyre's recommendation. The resolution right now would go on for 30-day public display. During that time period, we can call a policy committee meeting.
Okay,
In the interim, our current policy would still be in effect
Right.
until this one would be voted on or altered, amended, whatever.
correct. Okay.
So the message is, if you want the current policy to change, then I would suggest getting the ball rolling on something to be on display on public review, because you have 30 days to display a policy. Because without a change, we are still looking at policy 1221 as it stands today.
Everybody understands where we're at? Any other questions or comments? Bonnie, can we have a roll call?
Mr. Lapsevich,
Yes.
Mr. McIntyre,
Aye.
Mr. Ritter,
Aye.
Mrs. Warning,
Aye.
Mr. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Bova,
Aye.
Mrs. Cerrucci,
Aye.
Mr. Gottman,
Aye.
Dr. Kalkstein.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Dr. Scher, could you please set up